whose advice to take? As a business owner, you get a ton of advice. The easier it is to get the advice, usually the worse and least specific it is. The best advice is really tailored to your particular situation. Now, you can get a boatload of advice any given second just by going on the internet and reading advice. But I find that advice is better if the people who give it to you understand your situation. But that's a problem because it's very difficult to fully explain a situation. And I ran into this continuously writing for the blog, that I would try to distill a very complex situation down to 1,000 words, and I would get advice that was reasonable for what I had presented. But I always had to leave out some little thing that made it difficult to just take the advice straight off. And the bad advice comes in 4 basic types. And the first is just oversimplified internet crap, which is, you should sell more, or you should spend more time marketing, or something like that, which of course you would do if you could. But I ran into some other types of advice that were a little more interesting. So for instance, I had a partner for many years, and he gave me advice that was based on many years of experience, a successful businessman who'd owned manufacturing companies. And the only problem with it was his experience wasn't actually a good match for what we were doing. But at that time, I didn't have any other source of advice, so I was listening carefully to someone who was wise and being led vastly astray by this just because it looked like the source was reputable. So I call that kind of advice the wise but obsolete friend. The person who looks like they know what they're doing may well be quite successful, but their experiences in the past, and they don't really understand what the future is going to bring. There's another type, which is complex but valid ideas that you just can't execute. And this is advice that usually comes from people who are working or living in much larger organizations than a small business. And they have access to many more resources than the small business owner has. So I remember asking a question in the blog about how can you get the guys to care about their work? And someone suggested setting up a bonus program that was based on the output of each worker every hour. That you would measure their output every hour, keep records, and then bonus them at the end of the day for how much output they had. It's simply impossible to execute because there's no way for me to collect the data, there's no way for them to really measure the output, and then the bookkeeping involved in trying to calculate the bonus would have been a nightmare. So that was good advice for someone who's running a factory with 10,000 units an hour coming out the door, but bad for me. The best advice actually comes from a group of experienced peers. And if you're contemplating starting a business, or if you're running a business and you haven't done this, you should always try to find people who are doing the same thing you are, but aren't competing with you. So it doesn't hurt them to tell you how they're doing business. And I've found had tremendous value and success from talking to other business owners who are about the same size as me about issues that we all have in common. And I don't necessarily get woodworking advice from them, but I do get a lot of advice about how to deal with banks or taxes or lawyers or things like that. And it's also good to get a variety of viewpoints. You don't want to have someone just get very narrow only from your industry, but if you get it from different people, that's better. The last thing is that advice should be constant. It's much more powerful if you have people who you're constantly telling what's going on and you're getting sort of an updated picture of what to do, and you have a feedback loop going on. So I've been in the same Vistage group for 4 years now, and that's been enormously, really formed my ability to think about a bunch of complex issues. And as the business grows, I have a resource to go to say, hey, what lawyer should I use for this?